What is one thing your parents did to you that you'll never do to your children? Story 1. Threaten to destroy or hurt their favorite plush. It happened once, but it was a visceral feeling for a 5 years old. Story 2. I got a call from one of my parents on my 18th birthday, and after the obligational happy birthday, I was informed that I was now on my own. I'm not saying my parents are required to provide for me until I die, but that hurt so much because I was already in college, hours away from everyone I knew, and I already felt alone. Story 3 forced them to watch conspiracy theory videos, whisper to them that they're smarter or better than their sibling to motivate them, beat them. Explain nothing about finances, relationships, or sex to them. Squeeze their hand when I'm mad. Move random people into the house without explaining anything. Tell a 5-year-old to tell my ex-boyfriend that they miss him so he can come back. Tell them they won't be anything in life. Treat cleaning like a punishment. Ignore them when they speak. Tell them they can't play a sport because it's a gay sport. Story 4. I never even considered treating my child like I was treated. Even bipolar, sleep-deprived, poor, medial issues, stressed, and etc. The only time I ever raised my voice was when my kid was about to run into traffic. Kid was valedictorian in high school and went to college on scholarship, so it wasn't me being overly permissive or a doormat with a feral child either. We still hang out once a week and see a movie together. I went 7 years not talking to my dad and see my mom every few years. My parents said I'd understand when I had kids, but I understand them even less after having my own. Life has been hard for me. Treating my child well was easy, and it paid off for both of us. Besides keeping my patience and getting down on their level when having a discussion, I really recommend baby sign language. My kid knew 50 signs before they could talk, and it really helped with communicating needs and feeling engaged. Skipped the terrible twos entirely, and it wasn't that hard. My folks weren't that interested in making a time commitment. Story 5. My parents used me and my brother in their ugly divorce, constantly telling us lies about the other parent so we'd hate the other parent and love them more. I was 4 when they divorced, so you can imagine the impact. My mother went as far as wave an unopened letter in front of 7'9" Yo Me. Too young to remember what age I was exactly, but it was in our previous house, and I know when we moved. Saying the letter contained my father trying to strike a deal so he'd get my brother, and she'd keep me for a lot of money. And following it up, I should be happy she loved me so much while he didn't. It took 20 years and a few confrontation about this letter for her to admit such a letter never existed. After quite some time of gaslighting me, this situation never happened, and it was just my imagination. Now, it was just a mistake. So yeah, no matter how much I end up hating my partner, I would never put my children in the middle of that. What happened between me and the father is between me and him. That's still their parent, and they're allowed to love them. Or just make my problems about her. A core memory is when a student at my school notified the school they believed I was suicidal. I was. And they notified my mom, not even telling her that exactly, but just saying they believed I would benefit from psychological help because I was struggling. She came home crying and shouting at me how I could do that to her. I remember starting to cry myself and apologizing. Afterwards, she just wrapped it into, I wanted attention. If I ever have kids and their school tells me they need help because they're struggling, my first reaction will be, hey, what's up? Want to talk about with me? We can find a professional for you to talk to, and that's A-okay. Story 6. Always acted like nothing was ever wrong. Now don't get me wrong, my parents are and were amazing people, and I think they did a great job raising my sisters and I really wouldn't change a thing. They bent over backwards to make sure our lives were as safe and stable and comfortable as they could possibly make them for us. We wanted for nothing. It also taught all 3 of us a very wrong lesson. Adults don't have problems. If they do, they have failed. They didn't mean to do this, and they meant well, and I don't have children of my own. But if I did, I'd do it a bit differently. Of course, I would protect them from the worst life had to offer, but I would also let them in a bit more. Like, how you doing, Dad? Well, buddy, I'm having a little trouble with, everything will be fine, but sometimes things are a bit tough. Just that little confession would have really helped me out when I was a young adult trying to get my shit together on my own. Story 7. My parents turned every single one of my opportunities down for me, and now they fucking complain that I haven't purchased property yet. Well, no shit, fucker. You turned down all the opportunities for me since I was fucking 5 years old. They literally called in and turned all of these down over 20 times. Free, private school. Lots of job opportunities when I was only in my teens. Paid fellowships in my teens. Paid internships. Mentorship from a top-notch lawyer when I was a teen. I was scouted through my school, etc., etc., etc. I would never do that to anyone. Not just my children. I don't hate anyone to create failure for them like this. Story 8. Expose them to toxic family members. My mom's family was full of them, and she had them over literally every weekend and every holiday, so I always had to deal with my aunt bullying me and constantly putting me down. It made me very distant with my mom because she didn't protect me from it, and would guilt me when I complained or asked her not to have them over some days because, according to her, if she didn't have them over, my grandparents wouldn't get to see their grandkids because my aunts never visited their parents or took their kids to visit. Story 9. Forced me to kiss relatives. I hated it as a little kid, and I even remember once asking if I could shake hands the way my brother was allowed to do. I found it scary to have to kiss these big men with beards and women that reeked of perfume that I barely remembered from one visit to the next. Don't do that to your kid. Besides being a violation of their comfort zone, it teaches that they don't have the right to control who gets to touch and kiss them. Story 10. My mother made us feel like criminals when we called off sick from school. Sure, there were a handful of times we were faking, but the vast majority we already felt terrible and we were restricted from anything that might prove a distraction to that. We were made to sit in bed and do nothing, and if we so much as tried, we were scolded. Story 11. I was a passenger in my mom's vehicle when I came out to her. She didn't say a word, just sped around the corner, pulled over to the side, then said, "I think you're close enough to your father's to walk from here." She did eventually come around, but that was hard to get over. A few years ago, my dad confronted me about my weird dynamic with my stepmother. She'd always been cold to me. I always felt uncomfortable around her. I won't go into details, but she's pretty terrible. I finally let it all out and told him my experience with her. This caused me to never see her again. Yay. But my dad didn't want to see my POV at all. Our relationship was strained for years. We are finally good now, and he's leaving her. Yay. Story 12. Held me down for doctor's appointments to get them over with quickly. Now I have medical PTSD, and every time I go to the doctor and am touched, common now due to my health issues, I get flashbacks or end up having nightmares for a while afterwards. I never want my children to feel that way, and I think parents should let their kid take their time and calm down and relax more before forcing procedures on them. Not in an emergency, obviously, just for like routine medical procedures. Story 13. Make them help me with rent. I started babysitting when I was 9, and my mom took the money because she couldn't afford her weed and the bills, ground them and say, "You'll be ungrounded when I feel like it," which lasted anywhere from a year to whenever she forgot, but then came back up months later when she suddenly remembered. Slap them across the face because they woke me up from a nap, as my dad did. Blame them for everything not working out for me. Tell them they're making up their experiences. Choose a family member over them. Probably the biggest one. I would never allow someone who molested my children to stay in my house like my mother did. Force them into counseling, and then tell them they need to tell me everything that they said to the counselor or force my way into the sessions. Tell them to lie to teachers or police about what happens at home because CPs will take you from me. Story 14. My parents would let my boyfriend sleep over when we were 14 minus 18. At the time, kick-ass. But in hindsight, and as a parent of 2 teens myself, now, holy fuck, I will not be doing that. It's an absolute miracle I don't have a balding 30-something kid running around worrying about his mortgage. Story 15. Abandon them. Right now, my son just hit 18 and he's finishing up his last semester of high school, and he's not getting along with his mom very well. For example, he wants the right to bring his girlfriend upstairs and hang out alone, and my wife is having a hard time adjusting. He wants to move out at the end of the year, and I'm doing everything in my being to convince him to not move, and to take the opportunity to stay at home and save money rent-free and save for a house. A lot of this has been affecting me because I was kicked out at 15. Couch surfing until I was 18 and could no longer live in military housing. My younger brother only made it to 16 before getting kicked out. Working minimum wage, doing little side hustles, trying to go to school. Out of everything that hurt the most was, I was staying with my friend and his mom and little brother also on base housing, and his dad was coming home from a tour, and his mom was like, "Hey, could you not be here for a couple days?" And I literally didn't have anywhere to go. I went and stayed in the woods for a couple days and just sat there and wondered if my life was always going to be like that. That was such a horrible feeling. Story 16. My mom was great growing up except for making us sit at the table until we ate all our food. If we did not, we were punished. I understand her parents went through the depression, so I don't hold this against her. But as a parent, my dinner rules were completely different. I refused to argue about food, period. Mealtime should be calm, family time. If that means I throw on a grilled cheese or something for a child who didn't like what I was cooking, fine. Took maybe 5 minutes extra. Our lives were so crazy when the kids were young that I made sure dinner time was peaceful. Story 17. I was raised in a more traditional household growing up. As a man, there are certain values that I was taught, some of which I now know weren't any good at all. I want to preface this by saying that I love my parents, and I wouldn't change anything about how I was brought up. Not even this part I'm about to describe. I was bullied pretty extensively as a kid. I would frequently come home crying after a good day's worth of getting picked on. Eventually, my dad's approach to this became telling me that I was getting bullied because I was too easy to bully, too sensitive. I was crying too much and my bullies were having such an easy time getting that satisfaction out of me that they kept coming back for more. Essentially, he was trying to teach me that boys don't cry. 10-year-old me took this entirely too hard. I evolved to stuff my emotions way down and feel a lot less. To nobody's surprise, the bullying didn't stop. I just stopped talking about how it made me feel. Eventually, I was diagnosed clinically depressed and hospitalized for suicidal tendencies as a teen. As I got older, I got more well-adjusted, though my depression can sometimes come back in unexpected ways at times. For example, I've gone through bouts of alcoholism without really much thought or intention behind it after discovering how much I liked that numbing feeling. I cut it cold turkey when I got together with my partner, and can now have a drink or two without issue, though I get nauseous if I have hard liquor, which was my drink of choice back then. My dad has apologized profusely later on in my young adulthood for this, and has said this is something he would change about my upbringing. The result is still set, though, in that I'm one of those guys who has approximately 2 emotions, calm or angry. Truthfully, though, this isn't something I'm ready to change about myself. There have been many instances where my fairly immovable emotions have been greatly to my benefit, usually when navigating some extreme hardships with people I know. I've been to some places with friends that I think would have thoroughly rattled me if I had much more capacity for emotional empathy than I have. It's not that I don't have empathy, so much as that my empathy is at arm's length away from me, and having it there has proven useful many times. I have a strong sense of right and wrong that doesn't constantly get clouded by emotions, though I know I can be stubborn and get angry to my own detriment too. I'd consider myself a sort of modern manly man, a bit stoic and bull-headed with a get-her-done attitude, but without all of the rampant homophobia and misogyny. At least I hope my bisexual spouse, who is a woman and a feminist, would agree with that statement. She's pretty decisive. I think she would have left by now. We're 6 years on, if she didn't. Still, this is not a lesson I would wish on my children if we have any. I think it's important to be in tune with your emotions, but the distance has worked for me personally. Story 18. I fell out with my parents when I was 19/20ish years old and went no contact. As I was nearing my 21st birthday, I made a joke with my grandparents about wondering what wonderful coming-of-age gift my parents would get me. This must have gotten back to them, and shortly after my birthday, a card found its way to me. My wonderful mother had basically filled it with a balance sheet detailing my older sister's 21st birthday gift against what she perceived I owed her for my upbringing as such an ungrateful child. I think she came to the conclusion that I owed her about $4,000. This came on the back of years of passive-aggressive abuse, fat shaming, and the occasional physical assault. We are in an okay place now, following some hard work, but I do have to remind her to wind her neck in now and again. Most recently when she accused me of not being a good enough provider for my family because I'm not a bank manager like my dad and older sister. So yeah, I'm not going to treat my kids like my parents treated me at all. Story 19. Pinch me between the thighs. Believe other people instead of me. Only congratulate my achievements if I'm number 1, 2, or 3. Beat me for little learning mistakes I did. Let me grow up by myself. Have so many people in my house that the kids come as an afterthought. Shout at then when I can easily sit them down and try to explain. Slap them if they try to explain themselves or talk back. Force them into certain situations. Have them change clothing when a male relative visits. Be derogatory like, only gay men curl their hair. Are you gay? Or only sluts put on vanish or lip gloss or torn jeans at the knees. Call their friends' parents and tell them not to let their kids interact with my kid. Give them a proper sex talk. Not just keep your legs closed because people can pry or force them open. Story 20. Telling me to stop crying. Letting me have unrestricted internet access since 7. Telling other people what I did wrong or how I messed up. Usually my dad did this in front of my brother and mom. I have this memory where we were biking in Denmark for the first time, and I got really nauseous after the first road hill. When we got to where we needed to be, my dad started telling everyone how I was basically crying on the side of the road, saying, "What's wrong with you?" Telling me that I need to be more disciplined when I said, "I think I have ADHD. I am now struggling so much, but I refuse to tell my mom again because she'll say the same thing. My parents are great, but they are definitely flawed." Story 21. My parents have 2 children, myself and my sister. Years ago, they moved house to live within a 15-minute drive of my sister. They babysit for my sister at least 1 day a week. They go on holiday with my sister at least once a year. They build their entire schedules around my sister's needs. I moved to another country 6 years ago with my job, and they have yet to visit me once. And it's literally at most a 2 or 3 hour flight away. It's not like I'm halfway around the fucking planet. They could drive here if they wanted to. I visited them last Christmas, and at a big party with friends and family, one of the guests asked who I was, and was shocked to discover that I existed. I never knew had a brother, but they are adamant they don't play favorites and get very upset if there's even so much of a hint that people might think they do. Story 22. My mom would often compare me to my cousins. I struggled in math, and according to my mom, that was the end of the world. She would compare me to them with my struggle in the subject, including comparing me between them by my appearance, etc., often saying, "Why can't you be like your cousins? They don't struggle in math." I'm now 26, and it still upsets me, and promised myself that if I have children, I would never compare them to a family member, friend, etc. Story 23. It's a pretty extensive list, but I'll keep it short. Slap, verbally abuse, kick, beat with belt or other household items, deny food, affection, or time with the other parent, and lastly, believe them if they tell me they have been trying to avoid the advances of my friends. I did not live in a 2-parent household. Mom was a drunk. Story 24. Scream in my kids' face when they make you angry. Mom had some serious anger issues, and I'd stand there with her 5 inches from my face screaming at me. When she would ask why I did something, I'd get yelled at for talking. Mom had some serious issues she never had worked out. Honestly, didn't find out till I was an adult. It all makes sense now. It doesn't justify the verbal abuse, but I understand her now. I've never spanked my kids or screamed in their face and never will. I got the wooden spoon a lot of the time, or the belt. They wouldn't beat me with it, but I'd get hit 2, 3 times in the butt for them to get their points across.